Welcome to the history chapter with guest random Innkeeper, and let's talk about medieval food. Go ahead, then.
Today we discuss how people ate in medieval era on a countryside and in towns. So I start with the countryside, which was about 80% of the population lived not in towns or cities. But I guess there were not many cities, but mainly people live in the villages or in the countryside.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The most powerful person on the countryside was bailiff, which obviously had the best food. He could afford it. Then was the middle class on the countryside. It was craftsmen, millers, innkeepers, which is quite nice that I'm an innkeeper. And there were other people like farmers and peasants who couldn't eat as good food as the others, but they would survive. They cooked mostly simple foods because they had very hard work and didn't have time to cook some fancy food. So, as I said,
Turnips.
Yeah.
Turnips.
Yes. So as I said earlier, they only ate in the morning, then went to work, and then ate when they get back
at
home.
night.
There was a black kitchen in every household, which looked like a fireplace inside a building. And it was like that. It was a fireplace in the corner of a main living hall. And it is very good, very well seen in Kingdom Come. If you go randomly to a village house, you can see this fireplace with a bubbling pot on. But that's how the kitchens actually looked. During holidays or a special occasion, they cook better food, like most complex dishes, using the eggs, flour, lard, and more meat, which they saved for themselves. Otherwise, these goods were sold to towns to make living. And then they didn't have any exotic fruits, any imported goods. They mainly used what they grow or what they found in the woods or on the meadows. Most common dish was porridge, soup, bread, and dairy products such as mainly cheese. And there was a cornerstone. Actually, chat, tell me, what do you think was the cornerstone of medieval food? What was the main ingredient people ate back then? And I will take 3 ingredients. Grains, eggs, cabbage.
Yes, grains.
Yes.
So let's say grains.
So cabbage is a very good guess. Actually, it's the most common was cabbage and peas.
Peas, yes, that's it. Yeah.
And pearl barley. And there's one little mistake, I would say, in Kingdom Come. They have lentil mash and lentil soup, but there would be actually a pea mash and pea soup, because lentil was quite more demanding to grow than peas.
Okay.
And the cabbage was mainly used for fermentation. They make sauerkraut to last during the winter, as well as salted meats. But most meat there was sold into towns. And from the cereals, they mainly use rye, wheat, millet. They used nuts as well for oils like walnuts, hazelnuts, hemp seeds, and poppy seeds to make oils, to make porridges. Or just
porridges were very popular. Yes.
Eat them, yes.
Yeah. Just mix it all together.
Not porridge.
But juicy, like chapati, or more than if you bake it in the oven, it's a bit dry. But if you make a porridge of that,
you just crush it with milk.
Yeah.
They release its oil and make a really nice porridge, I would say. And the other porridges were obviously fruit porridges and grain porridges, like wheat porridge or oat porridge. They made as well hemp seed milk or almond milk, but almond milk was quite expensive, so it would be used with the townsfolk, not on a landscape.
Okay.
Or
Okay.
villages. And the interesting thing, they used beech nut for oil and for porridges, but it was kind of poisonous.
Even he did.
Yeah, they would eat it because they were hungry, and if you were poor, they mostly relied on what they grow or they find. So there would be some herbs such as caraway, parsley, thyme, tarragon, marjoram, dill, lovage, sage, mint, rosemary, and saffron. And saffron is very expensive today, but back then it grew widely on the meadows. So they have pretty much saffron as they if they wanted. Seasonally, mushrooms, fruit such as apples, pears, cherries, plums.
There are plenty of them. You can just go in the streets. There's plenty of
go around tree and grab it.
Yeah.
Apricots, peaches, and grapes, which they didn't make for wine because it was very difficult to make.
Only monastery towns.
Monastery and towns.
They had the equipment tools for it. Yeah. And time for that. We had time for
they
that.
dry their fruit and vegetables. From vegetables, they mainly use carrots, parsley, celeriac. So as I often say in my videos, root vegetables, onions, leek, cucumbers, and radishes. And carrots were used as a sweetener as well, since they couldn't afford an expensive sugar.
What was used as a sweetener?
Carrots.
Carrots, really?
Carrots, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. If you eat them, they are sweet.
If you cook them, they're sweet enough.
They're sweet, even especially if you cook them,
So
they are more sweet.
They use mainly honey, but a little honey, and the carrots.
Oh my gosh, that had to be really sweet. If you mix it together, honey with the carrots.
No, they use carrots if they didn't have.
Okay.
To sweeten up their porridge.
Yeah.
And another known condiment was mustard and horseradish. They mainly drink water, which they used for teas to make potions and lotions and teas from nettles, linden flower, strawberry leaves, rosehip, and chamomile. If they didn't have water, they drink beer because it was cheaper than wine. Let's head into the town.
All right, we are now in the town.
So on the top, there obviously were nobles in the castles and the rich,
royal, yeah.
Under them was wealthy townsfolk. There were craftsmen and the poor townsfolk. Well, in towns, the food was not only for nutrition, but for the presentation. And people get their food from markets and shops. And there were also black kitchens, but it was not part of the living room, but in the bigger household it was separated, and the food was bring out to the lords and to the people. Like in the countryside, the kitchen was part of the living room on the main hall, and in the towns there were separate kitchen, like a separate room. Yeah. And the most interesting and pleasing fact for me is that cooks weren't considered a craftsman, but an artist. And king, when
like today in some places, some restaurants, they're also artists.
Kind of.
But
it was even better then, because when a king went on hunt, bring cook with him on a hunt. That much honored he was. It's kind of cool fact. People in town could afford imported goods, mainly from Venice, Passau, or Vienna. They could afford spices, which meant wealth. And they use a lot of spices in weird combos just to show how well they are.
Yes, exactly. I'll add to that something. When we are having me, Toby, Chris dinner, and we were talking about the medieval pub, the Malaysia one, Toby mentioned there that they were really cooking the real medieval things, the cuisine, and it was really horrible taste. Because they mixed all like
all
random
spices
set, all
have.
spices, ingredients together, and without any sense, you know, and just to prove they're doing well and they're rich, and it was
just to prove they could afford it.
Yeah, yeah. It was
so they
horrible,
mixed pepper,
horrible.
cinnamon, cloves, maize, everything, raisins, almonds with meat, and it was crazy. And that's another thing which I'm going through when I read old cookbooks, because it usually says, take the meat, boil it, and put everything inside, all the spices you have, go ahead. And so I, due to my experience, have to decide what I use to taste it.
Yeah.
To make it taste good.
But in this case, I doubt they would call these cooks artists. Because they just take everything and put it in the one place. This is just, this would do a regular anyone.
The people were happy because they have their spices and they show their neighbors that I'm richer, I have more spices, so it doesn't matter it tastes horrible, but I'm rich. So
yeah. Presentation, presenting his wellness. Yeah.
And they basically used everything what people in the villages, but
wealth.
But they add this extra ingredients that people in the villages couldn't afford. Such in cereals were included rice, which was considered cereal, and was imported and thus very expensive. And rice substitute millet in porridges. I made a video with a lamp cake, lamp Easter cake, and the medieval one was from the rice. It was not supposed to be eaten. It was just decoration to show. Look at me, I have a rice. They bake pies and cakes, and mazance, pancakes.
We were talking about mazanet. Doesn't have English word. You can call it sweet bread, but it's not sweet bread. We were talking about it, if you remember, guys, about the Easter stream, what a mazanet is, and it looks like it's a roundish shape. It's like Christmas bread, the braided one, Christmas bread in Czech Vánočka. So this is the same. It's not bread. Yeah, it's the same. But it's roundish shape, and we call it in Czech mazanec. But it doesn't have English. It's just
Easter sweet
Easter
bread.
specific
Something
traditional
sweet pastry.
Yeah.
And they made it in towns to. They bake a lot. People in the villages didn't eat so many sweets because they didn't have time to bake. Yeah, people in towns did. And as I mentioned, peas was one of the cornerstones. So as people in villages used peas for meshes and soups, and people in towns use peas in desserts with sugar. And I have a video with that when I make pea sweet balls out of peas. It was quite disgusting. But I suppose that's one of the things that doesn't have to taste good as long as it is meant to look rich. Let's get to fruit. Apart from the fruit I mentioned in the villages, they eat it as well, but they also have imported fruits such as raisins, lemons, figs, dates, and melons.
Figs? Oh,
figs. Yes. Mostly dried to make porridges, to make some sort of spreads or jams, like povidla, thick jams. And what's important thing, among the rich people, mushrooms was considered poisonous.
What? Mushrooms?
Mushrooms. All mushrooms was considered poisons. And they only ate them with a lot of spices to neutralize the poison. And I have two recipes which I read I'm gonna read out for you. The first recipe is to just mix the mushrooms with horseradish and pear.
Pushka?
And horseradish.
The horseradish is good.
With mushrooms.
Yeah.
The second recipe is even more disgusting. So you mix the mushrooms with pepper, saffron, ginger, and raisins, and fry it. And fry it all. And that would neutralize the poison.
Cool! How many deaths?
Can you imagine a mushroom with the taste of raisins? And ginger, pepper, saffron, and then fry it.
Pepper. I miss salt there.
As for the meat, townsmen ate all kinds of meat, but typical meat for nobles was... Yeah, they mostly eat game meat.
Game.
Such as venison, rabbits, pheasants, all stuff. Otherwise, the poaching was a crime, as still is today, I believe.
Yeah, it is.
It is. They eat all kinds of meat, but the privilege of a nobleman
was game. Because they need to hunt it, especially. They were choosing something which is not common to commanders, to peasants, right?
Yeah.
So they were choosing hunt.
They were only available for noblemen.
So they would not eat something which is common.
They would not eat extra. Only game. They eat all the meat, but only them could eat game meat. Some symbolical meat dish which held tradition until today, such as St. Martin's goose, which is a highly religious symbol. And what would you consider a typical dish or feast during the Christmas? Got in my books there would be a pork feast.
Pork feast?
Pork feast.
Pork feast?
Yes.
Okay, different source. All right.
Or
pig meat. Yes, you're right, Largarzo, as he says.
Yeah.
Well, I have my source, and Martin has his source, and says pork. Why not? Okay.
No. They ate all birds, as we were. As there was a question about the chickens. They ate all birds, including the small ones.
On Christmas.
And including peacocks and swans.
That's interesting.
Some birds, water birds live by the water, was considered a lantern. You know what it is? Yeah. So they was allowed to eat them during the Lenten period.
Okay.
And they make jellied meat and meatballs. Jellied meat like huspenina. I already made a video of that. And meatballs, it's another interesting thing. The more the meat was cut up or ground meat, like the more it was grinded or cut, it was the most it were expensive. So only the rich people ate minced meat because it requires more work for cook to cut the meat. And rich people could afford olive oil and expensive almonds and sugar. And there was another show off to people that I'm rich, that I put sugar everywhere. So I cook meat with sugar. Yeah. And there's many recipes.
This was pretty disgusting.
Which take your meat and sugar it. As for drinks, there were imported wines, was expensive, and the spirits or liquor was mainly used in medicine. We all know how it is used in medicine, even today. It's good to mention the mead was popular.
Mead.
Mainly in early medieval times.
Yeah.
But over time, its popularity decreased thanks to cheaper beer and easier to make wine. And that is kind of all from me about this chapter.
All right, guys. Thanks very much to Random Innkeeper. Tough job, man. Thank you very much for introducing us medieval cuisine, food from medieval times among peasants and nobles. Very interesting chapter.